Hello, everyone, and welcome to this series of lecture on theories of personality, focusing on trait theories. This time, we will talk about Costa and McCrae's Big Five model. My name is Donis Bendicio, licensed psychometrician from Lahok Training Center. For your inquiries and suggestions, you may reach us through our email and Facebook accounts. That is hr.lahok@gmail.com. For our Google Mail address and fb.com/lahoktc for our Facebook account, or you can comment your suggested topics for our next session. For our group discussion and exchange of thoughts and ideas with psychology related subjects, you may join our group provided in the description of this video. Now, let's talk about a brief background of the authors, Paul Costa and McCrae. Now, Paul Costa received his PhD in Human Development from University of Chicago in 1970. He also taught at Harvard University and University of Massachusetts at Boston. Now, he joined in 1978 with the National Institute on Aging, and in 1985, he became chief of the Laboratory of Personality and Cognition and joined the Gerontology Research Center. Now, Paul Costa also published research articles. Many of them he collaborated with Robert McCrae. And Robert McCrae received his PhD in personality psychology at Boston University in 1976. And he also taught and conducted research at Boston University, the Veterans Administration Outpatient Clinic in Boston as well, and the University of Massachusetts. Now, Robert McCrae joined Gerontology Research Center at the National Institute on Aging, and he's also a fellow of Gerontological Society of America, also a fellow of APA Division 20, focusing on adult development and aging. All right. Now let's talk about the Big Five model of Costa and McCrae. Now it is believed that person's personality can be explained by five core dimensions, namely the OCEAN acronym, which refers to openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Now, this Big Five model produced from the enrichment of many researchers. We have Henry Albert and Goldberg Alport, for example. These individuals or researchers establish a list of words, likely around 4,500 words, to describe personality traits in 1936. Their work contributed to the creation of this Big Five. And we also have Raymond Cattell in 1940s. Raymond Cattell and his collaborators used factor analysis. This is a statistical method to narrow down Alport's list, okay, to 16 traits. But many psychologists, such as McCrae and Costa, studied Cattell's list and found out that it could be lessened to 5 traits. Now, Costa and McCrae acknowledged also the vital role of Eysenck when he identified extroversion and neuroticism. Now, this discovery of Eysenck led to him producing Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, or the Eysenck Personality Inventory, or EPI. Now, these tools tend to measure these factors. However, Eysenck, or rather, Costa and McCrae rather disagreed with Eysenck psychoticism factor. Now, they initially proposed, Costa and McCrae proposed a different factor, what we call this the openness. When they discussed this with Eysenck, Eysenck felt or thought that openness might be opposite pole of psychoticism, but McCrae and Costa believe that these factors are actually different. Since then, so Costa and McCrae moved beyond the third factor of openness and added two more factors, namely the agreeableness and conscientiousness. Now, together, McCrae and Costa developed this NEOPI, or the Neuroticism, Extraversion, and Openness Personality Inventory, which later then developed into a revised NEOPI, or what we call NEOPI R, which also measures the agreeableness and conscientiousness. All right. Now, Lewis Goldberg also played an important role in development of this Big Five. Okay. So he advocated gradually for five primary dimensions of personality. Now his work was expanded by McCrae and Costa, who confirmed model's validity and provided this model more useful in terms of psychometric properties, okay, and researches as well. Now, McRae and Costa proposed these five dimensions or factors, namely the openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Let's discuss this one by one. First, let's discuss openness, the openness factor. Now, this factor usually represented by a person's openness to experience. What is that? So that a person who are exhibiting this kind of characteristic or dimension appears to be imaginative, somewhat thinking outside the box, and spontaneous instead of being conventional, routinary, and somewhat practical. Now, a person who scores high in this factor tends to perceive as someone being creative, someone being artistic or curious to know new things and being independent. All right. Now, there are researchers who suggest that high score with openness are relatively relevant or related to other factors. For example, we have Neil and colleagues in 2012. They suggested that openness to experience is positively associated with individual proactivity, but it is negatively related to team efficiency. So, for this example, a person who is open to new experience can exhibit creativity, being imaginative or being creative with his or her output. But this may suggest that person may be focusing on energy on oneself and less likely of the teamwork. On the other hand, a person who scores low prefers routine activities, right? So he feels uncomfortable in trying new things and finds creativity rather difficult. For an instance, a person who feels comfortable with the usual work that he or she has or job that he or she has in his career might feel upset when given different or more challenging tasks. All right. Now, this openness factor is also related to married lives. Now, Myers in 2011 suggested that married individuals who score low on openness of experience rather have uh, marital dissatisfaction. Okay, marital dissatisfaction in the later part of the relationship. Now this means lack of openness to new experiences might be considered in a relationship. In addition, Soto and John in 2012 suggested that openness to experience and neuroticism decrease slightly from adolescence and middle adulthood. Now let's proceed with the next topic or factor. We call this a conscientiousness. Conscientiousness is likely described to those individuals who have large level of good impulse. Now they are described to be organized, thoughtful, and goal-directed behaviors. For instance, a person who likes to organize his plans, time, and goals may exhibit high score of conscientiousness. So this person has the ability to manage his or her own impulse in such a way of directing his behaviors to desired goals. All right. Now, researchers such as John and Srivastava in 1999 suggested that conscientiousness is protective factor against health diseases. Why is that? So, a high score individual for conscientiousness may likely indicate better health outcomes because of this dimension may gauge an individual's well-structured lives to develop a regular exercise, healthy diets, or treatment plans and the like. Okay. Now, in contrast, a person who has low conscientiousness may lack direction. He or she might have poor impulse control. has a problem in performing tasks and achieving goals. Now, these individuals tend to dislike structured and organized processes. Most of the time, a person may likely commit impulsive behaviors, which also include poor time management, failure to commit to deadlines, tasks, and goals if he or she has a low score in conscientiousness. Now, conscientiousness appears to contribute to overall performance of a person in terms of academic and workplace as well. Now, Myers in 2011 suggested that high rate of conscientiousness determines better university or high school grades. In contrast, John and Srivastava in 1999 suggested that individual who has low conscientiousness or agreeableness can determine juvenile tendency or juvenile delinquency. Okay. Now, it has been suggested that an organized person who has high score with conscientiousness may likely to perform well in his or her job. For instance, again, John and Srivastava in 1999 found out that high score of conscientiousness has been shown to relate to high work performance. How is that? This is a good insight among employers or human resource practitioners if found out that the person maintains good order and directness in his or her thinking and behavior towards goal in a more organized manner if he or she found to be high score of this factor. Now let's proceed with the next one. We have extroversion. Extroversion may be characterized with a person who has this ability to socialize, who likes to be sociable, fun-loving, and being assertive over characteristics such as being reserved, thoughtful, and prefers to be alone. Now, extroverted individuals show tendency and character of someone who wants to seek interaction with other people. For example, uh, we may observe a person or a friend who shows being assertiveness, being talkative, being somewhat fun-loving, and emotionally expressive. That person feels emotionally recharged in social gatherings or social situations. He or she likes being excited to be surrounded by people. Now, John and Srivastava in 1999 suggested that the extraversion is a good predictor of leadership, success in sales, and management settings. Okay. Now, a person who scores low in contrast with extroversion is often referred to as an introverted type of person who is more likely observed to be quiet and in social events and most likely prefers to listen rather than talking. For example, a person might observe to be preferred listening to others rather than wanting to be heard. He is comfortable listening to stories of that person than talking. He usually needs this silent place so he can recover or recharge his or her energy since visiting social events can be tiring for him or her. But this cannot explain that such person doesn't like social events. Okay. Now, let's proceed with agreeableness. Agreeableness is likely described to those individuals who are being trusting, helpful, and agreeable and cooperative as well, compared to those individuals who are manipulative, suspicious, and uncooperative. Now, those individuals who tend to have this agreeable type of characteristics are likely altruistic or helping type of individuals. They are affectionate and have these pro-social behaviors. That is according to Ackerman in 2017 and Sherry in 2020. Now, Neil and colleagues in 2012 suggested that agreeableness is negatively related to individuals' proactivity. What does this mean? Now, the person who has a high agreeableness tend to less likely control a situation. For example, this type of person tends to be affectionate and sympathetic towards another person. So they don't like to hinder their relationship with others. And an agreeable person tends to follow rules. Okay, compared to extroverted individuals, a person can be talkative and assertive if he or she is extroverted one. He or she might like to express his or her own opinion and emotion. So they are relatively expressive when it comes to their opinion and emotions. But agreeable person described to be cooperative. Okay? So how genuinely helpful a person to others that is agreeable. So this comparison suggests that a person may be not genuinely helping another person if he or she is high in extroverted and low with agreeableness, but rather he or she is seeking social stimulation to regain energy through others. If that person has high extroversion and low agreeableness. So this also explains why a person with low agreeableness tends to commit manipulation and being uncooperative, shows suspiciousness, and making them less likely to be well liked and trusted. Now, John and Srivastava in 1999 suggested that a person with low agreeableness may also likely experience health problems. Okay. Now, in the last factor that we are discussing, we have neuroticism. Now, neuroticism is best described with person's emotional stability. Okay, through this perspective of neuroticism, we can explain a person's perception of the world or interpretation of his or her experiences. Now, a person who has high neuroticism tends to be anxious, relatively pessimistic, okay? He or she exhibits negative emotions most of the time, being sad or emotionally unstable or during distressful events. Okay. For example, a colleague or a person who is close to us may likely show symptoms of sadness, self-pity, or insecurity when received criticism coming from other coworkers or from his superior. Okay. So that person may also be perceived as an irritable, moody person. He or she shows self low self-esteem and generally exhibiting emotional instability. Lahey in 2009 suggested that neuroticism looks to be a risk factor for symptoms or diseases such as depression, schizophrenia, as well as physical diseases such as diabetes, asthma, irritable bowel syndrome, and heart disease. Okay. Now, people who are high in neuroticism are especially vulnerable to depression. Okay. So, on the other hand, a person with low neuroticism tends to be confident, calm, emotionally stable, and likely resilient when facing adversity or a problem or problematic situations. For example, during this stressful social event, a person who is high in or low in neuroticism may likely show calmness and relatively balanced mood. Okay, so in general, these factors, the openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion, and neuroticism is a spectrum. What does this mean? Now, this Big Five model suggests in contrast of binary categories such as being introverted alone or extroverted alone, thus avoiding the simple explanation of a person's personality that he or she is purely introverted or extroverted type. This theory suggested that our traits in terms of the said factors is in a spectrum, thus explaining a person's characteristics likely to be inclined to certain category or factor with the help of scoring them being ranked on scale between two extreme ends. Okay, so for example, we have extroversion. So for extroversion, one would not be classified as purely extroverted or purely introverted, but rather a place on scale determining their level of extroversion by ranking individuals on this trait. It is also possible to effectively measure individual differences in personality using NeoPi or a NeoPi R, which we had been mentioned a while ago. We have learned that behavior involves an interaction between a person's underlying personality and situational variables. Okay, and in addition, these different factors may likely, or may not always likely occur together. So, for an instance, in a study of Bojanelos in 2003, he suggested that before we dismiss personality as useful predictor of work involvement, it may be wise for us researchers to investigate relationship between big five factors and work involved in other organizational and occupational contexts. For example, a researcher may find or investigate on working conditions or commercial organizations probably demands more flexibility. So dedicated involving working or in a public sector. So a person traits may also be likely influenced by the situational factors or the context of this organization. So this is the dynamics of different factors of the big five. Okay, so they work differently depending on the context and also the levels of characteristics of these factors. So these are the article references that we have, or the presentation references. All right. So for your suggested topics as well as concerns and suggestion, you may reach us through this email address, hr.lahok@gmail.com and fb.com/lahoktc. Okay. Thank you so much, guys, and we will see you in the next video.